Welcome, everyone, to Planetary Gig Talk Live. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassie, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gigs Society, whose mission is making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace and harmony. And boy, oh boy, I am really in the clouds right now over this conversation that we're going to have, this music and Hermeticism. It's one of the most profound things I've come across recently in my life, and so glad to have brilliant people here who know about this to ask about and have a conversation so that we can all learn a little bit more about it. So first, let's just go around. Sue Terry, so great that you are here. I found you virtually. You know, it's one of those things we met online, but we haven't met. But the author of the book, Music and the Seven Hermetic Principles, so timely. Thank you for being here.
Wait. Oh, there it is.
There it is. Oh my God, I have it. It's a great book, and I really appreciate your being here and looking forward to chatting about all this.
Well, Jefferson, thanks for inviting me and for assembling this very illustrious panel. So I'll just say I'm a musician, a composer, and a writer, a researcher. Uh, I've been combining metaphysics and music for a long time. I'm basically known as a jazz musician
Mhm.
for most of my career, but of course I've played lots of different styles of music, and um, I ha- I know Cornelius from he's a shakuhachi master, and I've been studying shakuhachi now for about 6 years. So he's one of my mentors, and he wrote the foreword for my book. So I thought he was a perfect person also to be on the panel today.
Yeah, that's another thing we'll have to learn about. I'm not even sure I can
Yeah.
pronounce that, but Cornelius, thank you very much. As Sue just said, I knew of you because she said he wrote the introduction to the book, and I thought he must know something about Hermeticism. So, welcome and thank you for being here.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks for having me. And yeah, Sue came through town on tour. So we only met in person 2 or 3 years ago and had such a lot of background in common. I'm also a lifelong woodwinder, composer, but my specialization was bass clarinet for several decades. So jazz, classical, rock, experimental, and sort of uncategorizable styles writing for bass clarinet, but I discovered basically occult philosophy freshman or sophomore year in music school, and the fact that in the Renaissance, for instance, a lot of the composers were also what you would have to call, magicians or doctors or
Mm.
astrologers. The term Renaissance man was appropriate. That things weren't siloed yet. Things hadn't peeled off and become separate disciplines. Now, at least in the late 20th century, you couldn't, like you couldn't really dabble seriously in biology if you were a chemist, and that wasn't how it was in the 1500s, at least in Europe. And then through shakuhachi I found shakuhachi through Zen, and Zen has sort of been the opposite pillar of occult philosophy for me, Zen and Taoism, because that's very distilled. One of the opportunities and issues with occult philosophy, Hermeticism, is how kind of busy it can get, and it gets real. A lot of the practitioners and people that wrote and had practices and followings were super secretive, and it overlaps with Rosicrucianism and Freemasons, and so it's exciting, and you discover a lot of gems, but sometimes you just gotta put all that back in the cabinet of curiosities and sit. So Zen,
Fascinating.
so Zen is the other polarity, and there's a lot of overlap, of course. East West. I mean, alchemy was a
Hmm.
Taoist thing. It was a Hermeticism and occult thing, Rosicrucian thing. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we've lost in our obsessively scientistical view that I think people need to get back into in a serious way.
Oh man, there's so much there. And finally, a good buddy, Peter McClard, describes himself as a musical theoretician. And I was introduced to Peter by Michael Cott. And so we've shared some wild conversations. But thank you for being here, Peter.
My pleasure, Jefferson. It's always a wonderful privilege to participate in one of your discussions, and anytime we're together, it's great. Nice to meet everybody. And yeah, so I started pretty young as a musician. I was always attracted to music, and picked up the guitar at a young age, and have since then branched into composition, and I've written a lot of music over the years. But yeah, in high school I learned software programming, and I started that journey. In college I went to a great books program, and that really opened my mind to philosophy and the interaction with all these brilliant students and friends that I still have as lifelong friends. I got introduced to all sorts of ideas, including secret teachings, you name it, the Urantia book, whatever it is. We discussed it all late into the night for many years, and so that ignited a fire inside me. And so when I graduated, my thesis was something that I had one of those epiphanies about, and it's called holistic tonality, and we've discussed that before. And so I wrote a music theory, which is very much related to what we're talking about today. And then my software career sort of took off after college, and I founded some software companies, and that's how I made a living. And my interest in software was always in music software and graphics software. And so those are the two areas that interest me. I didn't go into finance or data analysis and all that stuff, which is yeah, but I use a lot of geometry and mathematics, and I just love geometry and beauty and aesthetics and colors and all that stuff. So, and it just fits well with my musical career and my musical thinking. So it all ties together. For me, I try to live a complete life of aesthetics and philosophy, and keep on learning every day something. Or just appreciating. If I'm not learning, I'm trying to appreciate. So this is a great discussion to get into because it all fits with what the topic is.
It sure all fits. Okay, so there's so much to learn. This Hermeticism is really amazing. I mean, for musicians, for everybody, to me, it's kind of like a guide path to how to lead a good life in a way. But I'm just going to start off we're going to go through each of the 7 principles, so that everybody gets a feel for that and hears some perspective about it. But I'll just start by saying, and this is kind of a cause and effect intro. I was in India. I kind of went to a meeting in India right before the pandemic. Met a guy. I was led to the Devi Music Ashram in Rishikesh. Really led there. I mean, I don't know how I got there. Met a guy named Sandro Shankara from Brazil, who was leading some pilgrims there, and turns out he also leads tours or whatever, going into the Amazon rainforest to be with the tribes for ayahuasca journeys and that sort of thing. I ended up going there, and we had some other programs that we worked on together. And one of the guys that I met in Brazil, Thiago, there weren't that many people who spoke English, so we became friends. He came up to the U.S. this summer, and we went out to lunch, and I just happened to say, so what are you doing these days? What, you got any spiritual things you're focusing on? And he said, well, Hermeticism, as espoused by Hermes Trismegistus. And I went, what? So I've been getting the books, listening to a lot of YouTubes on it, just trying to learn as much as I can. It just seems so profound. And so that's my whole introduction, is just I was led to this thing too, when the what is it? When the student is ready, the teacher appears, something like that. So, Sue, I think you'd be the best person to just start off and say, talk about what is Hermeticism to you, and then lead into the first principle of mentalism, and then we'll just go round and round till we round it out.
Okay, so I think a lot of people were introduced to the idea of Hermetic philosophy through this book called The Kabbalion. And as you can see, the author says it's by three initiates, like it's an anonymous author. And this was common back in the day. This book is from the early 20th century, but it comes from the New Thought movement, which originated in the 19th century. And it was common for students and disciples of a philosophy to not want to put their name, because they thought that the ideas were the most important thing. So that's why it says three initiates. And basically, this is a compendium of the ideas in Hermetic philosophy, which go back to ancient Egypt. And I mean, thousands of years ago, these ideas were developed, were espoused, and through the centuries, they've altered a little bit, maybe in their presentation became a little more simplified. But if you want to go back to some of the original texts, you can go back to one called the Emerald Tablet. You can go back to, there's some chapters in the Nag Hammadi library that are specifically denoted as Hermetic texts. And there's a lot of literature in the repertoire to consult. But the Kabbalion is a great introduction to the 7 Hermetic Principles, which are mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, gender,
Cause and effect. Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. Right. So these principles, the reason that I wrote the book, which I called Music and the 7 Hermetic Principles, because I woke up one day. I mean, I've been studying the Hermetic philosophy for probably like 40 years or more. And one day I woke up, a couple years ago with this idea, wait a minute, the Hermetic philosophy goes with music. Everything that it talks about goes exactly with music. And in fact, 2 of the principles, vibration and rhythm, are integral terms that we use in music all the time. So the idea to launch into the first principle of mentalism, as per Jefferson's suggestion, this comes from, we can simplify it into all is mind. And what that means is that saying mind, it's a name, it's just another name for something that other people may refer to as God, or the Tao, or Brahman, or infinite spirit, or divine force, or the great pumpkin, or whatever is your deity of choice. It's the ultimate unchanging reality that is the fabric of the universe, and it's one. It's one thing that includes all of the aspects of reality that we know about and the ones that we don't know about. But the one always wants to divide itself into parts so that it can know itself. Because if it just remained all unified, it wouldn't be able to reach the depth of understanding. And so the one always wants to, first it divides into 2, and then it divides into more and more parts so that it can know itself. And in music, we can start by incorporating that principle by saying, well, when we write music, we imagine it first. Or when we play music, when we create music, when we're improvising, whatever, however the music comes into form, we hear it first in our head. And that's the only way it can happen. It has to start in mind. And if we want to go more metaphysical, we can say that when it comes to our mind, first it was in the universal mind. First it was in the big mind, and then it came into our mind, and then we put it out there into the world. So that's the basic idea of all is mind.
Cornelius, what's your thought about Hermeticism sort of generally, and then mentalism?
Yeah, well, like I said before, occult philosophy writ large is sort of my main reference, and I discovered that from this book, which I'm trying to reread because I haven't read it since '94. And Tomlinson can be overly academic, and so I'm always cursing him and his jargon, but it's really good. I don't know how I read it as a freshman. I just started rereading it. I'm like, this guy, he's just pages and pages about the methodology and how many times can you put hermeneutic on the page in one. But anyway, that's my academic sort of like rant. But once he gets into, here's what Agrippa and Ficino and a bunch of Renaissance composer magicians were up to, it basically solved the problem. Like I heard about, music of the spheres, right? Which is a kind of correspondence kind of a thing, right? Like, and I was going to do a paper on that because I thought it was a cool topic. You know, the basic thrust of it is we know music's powerful, and our current modalities of understanding music as a commodity or a sort of like strained, starving artist vocation are not sufficient for those of us that know that there's a lot more going on. And so what are the modalities or modes of thought that explain its power? Because emotion is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that's the best you'll get. Even in very advanced music circles today, it's like, well, there was a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling, and it's like that's kindergarten for cosmic forces. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing wrong with people getting emotional from music, but that's not at all the limits of it. So I was looking for that kind of thinking, and I found it in this book. Music of the Spheres stuff, I didn't find it there. It was pretty boring. There was just a chart. It's like Jupiter is the Dorian mode, and it stands for the key of F or D or whatever. Like, it was just a chart, and there was no depth to, like basically what Sue is getting everybody into in her book, where it's like, no, these are profound principles, and here's we're doing it in music. It's happening all the time. So, mentalism, yeah. To call that a deity, I think is a little risky, but we'll skip that. It's more like a universal consciousness. Deity is a thingified, and so like with serious different Taoist interpretations, it's as soon as you start thingifying at all, you're on shaky ground. But that, because unity consciousness and unity as a principle, you can only really, you can't cognize that. Our cognition is based on polarities. I think we'll get to that when we get to polarities. Is that one of the principles, polarities? Mm-hmm. So everything does have to start there. I find it interesting that it's called, because I wasn't familiar with the Kabbalion until Sue's book. I had read a translation of the Hermetica. Tried to find more detail about Emerald Tablet, and like I said, other Rosicrucian texts and things like that. But mentalism is a different term, like in the sort of performance magic category, where it's about really guessing what somebody is saying. So, but that's just high mode, low mode. I mean, that's not different, right? If you're all riding the same waves, then you can sort of listen to those strings and resonate with that. So actually the two terms are used very differently, but they kind of mean the same thing. So I think in Hindu philosophy and generally East Asian philosophical Eastern, it would be like the collective universal consciousness. In Buddhist psychology, it's all the sense perceptions have their own consciousness: eye, ear, taste, consciousness. The seventh is the manas, which is the twist of a self, and then the eighth is just collective, like everything. So like Thich Nhat Hanh is all about that. What seeds are you watering in the collective consciousness? If you water the harmful seeds, then that's your fruit. So that's cause and effect.
And what you were pointing out to before, like there's always an interior and an exterior aspect to everything. Like there's a superficial aspect and then there's a deep aspect, right? Principle of correspondence, right? So it's like when you start really thinking about it, the principles permeate everything in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, that's what I would say is that the principles, kind of exist in the universe, and anything that we bring our consciousness to reflect on, which without our consciousness and our minds, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be aware of these things. It would, at least as we are thinking now. But you live inside the seven principles of vibration and polarity, and we live inside the singularity. In fact, we live inside what they call the Big Bang. We are in that right now. We are in the singularity. So that singularity is a whole, and it probably includes all of time, so that all the different times are there too. And so our minds can slice and dice that into the now that we are experiencing right now. And I do believe that that music is also foundational, and music and geometry and mathematics are sort of this mysterious language that kind of holds a lot of it together. And music is very mental thing for us, because as Sue was saying, improvising or composing or using your willpower to create something, it starts in the mind. And whether or not you were sort of destined to have that thought, or it came from the Akashic record or something, some other place where that originated from, it still passes through your consciousness and into your fingers or your computer or whatever you're using to get the music out there. And then the other side of it is, once the music becomes vibrations in the air, then it starts vibrating our eardrums, and those vibrations then excite all of the beauty inside the mind to let us perceive it.
Yeah, this mentalism thing, in Ho'oponopono, and we did some sessions on music in Ho'oponopono a while ago. They say, did you ever notice that if there's a problem, you're there? And maybe a way to turn that in, or to speak it in these terms, did you ever notice that when you do everything, your mind is there? It's all in your mind. And if, say, you're doing something at work and somebody's doing this and doing that, it's all in your mind. I've been very influenced by Victor Wooten, his book, The Music Lesson, and going to, that was practically one of the inspirations for founding Planetary Gigs Society.
Oh no!
And it is.
Oh, not the spiritual dude froze.
Oh, did I? Oh well, I'm still going here.
If you're frozen there in the Himalayas.
You froze there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
There's motion.
You're back.
You're back.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, good. So I've been to several of his Spirit of Music camps. He has other camps at Wooten Woods outside Nashville. And one of them, you have to go find objects like in a field or in a barn, just that are hidden there. And one of the things he says about it is, that one of the most important things about music, about playing music, is this mental aspect of it, because so much is in the mind. It's a really good sort of a starting place to realize things are not just what they seem. So the second principle is this correspondence, which means everything corresponds, and within, without, as above, so below. So Sue, what is your take on correspondence, as above, so below? How do you talk about that for musicians or other people in terms of trying to understand what's going on?
Right. So that means there's a relationship between the different levels of life. Because everything comes from this one source, all is mind, but we have connection between all of these different levels, like we spoke before about the superficial versus the profound, or the interior versus. Okay, that's one of the levels manifesting itself.
Yeah, yeah.
The snafu level.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it just went down.
O- Okay,
Glad
so
you're back.
in in music, we have different principles that we talk about. And speaking of Victor Wooten, and I love his book, The Music Lesson, and I really want to meet him, and I really want to meet his brother Roy as well. And I know you know them, Jeff, so counting on you to make that happen. But he talks about in his book too that melody, harmony, and rhythm, that's just like the most basic aspects of music. We have so many more things that we use to make the music come alive. We have color, texture, expansion, compression, space, phrasing, articulation, dynamics. There's so many elements that we use to create music. You can't just say it's melody, harmony, and rhythm. That's just the most basic plan. So these are always present in not only in any genre of music that you're talking about, but also in any art. All the arts use these same principles. And so they just get expressed in different ways depending on
Yeah.
what genre you're talking about. And that's my take on the idea of correspondence. And then in the book, I go into other things like known versus unknown, which to me, that's fascinating because as an improviser, my whole life, when you improvise, you have to take things that are elements from the known realm, the notes and the chords and the scales and all the tools that we use, and then you have to create something from the unknown. You have to take the known and integrate it with the unknown. And sometimes something is known and then it retreats into the unknown. Like there's a lot of ancient knowledge that is just coming to light now. Or if you look at ancient civilizations like Göbekli Tepe, nobody ever heard of Göbekli Tepe, and then Graham Hancock goes there and, does a whole TV program series about it, this archaeological site where there were all these old, these incredible ruins, and now everyone knows about it again. So things retreat from known to unknown and back. And this is also part of the idea of correspondence. Paracelsus talked about signatures of plants, and that's how we get homeopathy, and how we get the idea of curing illnesses with like substances. And we have signatures in music as well. We have them in octaves, because the octave is the same note, but the same signature of frequency, but it's in a different gradation, but it's related to
Right.
all of its other octaves. So that's a brief synopsis.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Cornelius?
Yeah, well, just to back up a little bit to mentalism and be slightly, I always find myself thinking the contrarian thoughts. So, I think it's and as a Zen person, the word mind is really fraught. It's really dangerous. And so we all mean something by music's in the mind first, and the mental aspects. Most of my work as a teacher is getting people to understand their body has other kinds of intelligences that their mind is not equipped to do. So their cognitive analytical mind. So the term mind is tricky. Of course, there was a mind-only Zen school for a long time. So that's of the same type as all is mind. It's just the language can get really it's got baggage. So it's really tempting to approach all these topics and principles in a mechanistic way, and they are mechanics in a way, but that we have to approach them, I would suggest, non-mechanically. They're like beholding, mysterious actions. You know what I mean? So correspondence starts to get a little more mechanical, because in my mind, it's basically as above, so below, as within, so without. That means there's an axis somewhere. And so on this side, it's like the looking glass. Now we're in samsara. We're already in the dream, the delusion. Once we're not in the all, and so all these principles. I mean, you could collapse cause and effect, polarity, and correspondences, and maybe one of the other principles. They're very overlapping because they're all this kind of where there's an axis in the middle, and you got this over here, and that conjures this over here, and they have a relationship. Like I said, with Swedenborg, where he had something that's like archetypes, so where you've got a celestial reality, and then here terrestrially you have a correspondence of what that is. That's my vague understanding. I'm not a Swedenborg expert, but and so certainly for arranging or for being creative within ensembles, some of that's already going on, but just thinking about this looking glass principle kind of gets you like basically humbles you to that you're not coming up with everything yourself. If you come up with this, and then this is kind of conjured on the other side, so to speak, So or you could become more aware of these relationships and sort of navigate what they mean for your practice or for your composition or for your ensemble.
Mm-hmm. Peter, your thoughts on?
Yeah, I like to think of this particular principle in terms of kind of a holistic or a fractal nature of either, the universe, but music especially. For me, I believe, that, the sounds we hear, the timbre of the instrument is whispering in our ear something that's going to inform the structure of the music and the melodies, the rhythms, and sometimes, so that's the levels communicating with each other. And when you play a composition and you play something that's in the context of your show, let's say you're a performer and you're doing a number of pieces, one piece is a part of a larger show that you're putting on, a musical performance, and that also becomes a part of your life. So your life is also another sort of part of that structure. And I see it as sort of like all of these levels are tied together, and it's good to use your mind to tie in those levels and to realize that your life is also reflected in the smallest piece of sound that you might be creating as a musician. So once you can feel that connection between those disparate levels, I feel like the principles are working for you, and it's more fulfilling for you as a person on the journey.
Yeah.
And this is another point, that when we're creating music, we have to take responsibility for what we create, right? Like I tell my students, don't write anything that isn't worthy of lasting 100 years, I mean, we're still playing Mozart and Bach, right? So if what we put out there is, like Peter's saying, it's part of a universal whole, and it's a contribution that we're making to the universe. And I think the universe likes to receive these contributions from artists, And so when I look at it like that, then I feel more of a responsibility of what I create, and is it worthy of being out there? And I'm trying to look like, there's that expression, pray without ceasing, and I forget if that's Thomas Aquinas or where that comes from, but I always wondered about what is the meaning of pray without ceasing? Are you going to sit there, and be like this all day long? And then suddenly, a couple of weeks ago, the idea of what that means came to me, that everything you do is a form of prayer, because you're conscious of the relationship that your contribution has to the universe. I listened to some records that CB gave me, that Cornelius gave me, that he made, called Sabbaticus Rex. It's Sabbaticus Rex 1 and 2. and they're incredible soundscapes. And to me, when I listen to those, I feel like he made them for the universe. You know, they have that quality that is, it's an openness and an offering type of quality. And to me, I think that's what pray without ceasing means. It means everything that you do is a form of prayer. And of course, all the Hermetic principles help you to understand how to break that down.
And in Jefferson's quest for peace and harmony throughout humanity, I feel like sometimes that responsibility is also towards, on that cultural level, where our music manifests into the culture, and it communicates between cultures, and then humanity puts out that whole bit to the universe, and that's who we are. That's what we are, is what we put out there, and so that's the responsibility you're talking about. We have a responsibility to each other, to the earth, and to the cosmos.
Yeah,
and we also have the polarity of not being able to achieve that on a human level. You know, not being able to achieve peace and harmony and all. I mean, you can't even order Coke and Pepsi in the same restaurant.
Yeah, that's funny. So I look at this. One of the things about Hermeticism to me is that when you try to learn about quantum physics and some of these things, the double slit experiment, spooky action at a distance, all these things, you think, how in the world is that really possible or relevant? And to me, this principle of correspondence is the one that ties that together so much. You know, an atom looks like a galaxy. The veins in our body look like trees. The roots look like the tree branches. It kind of shows you that the things that we're learning it helps me to know that, well, it's all kind of the same principles are at work. Anyway, so
vibration is there too.
Yeah, so we'll go into the third, fourth, and fifth to kind of make it a little bit more efficient in our conversation. But vibration, polarity, rhythm, everything always vibrating to the point of, this desk is not really solid. It's just all vibrating with a lot of space. And the polarity, this is one of Victor's big things, is yin and yang. He says there's always the yin and yang, and in order to be good, there has to be bad. And the way that they explain the polarity to me is all opposites are the same, just different in matters of degree, hot and cold, that sort of thing. And then rhythm, everything is all, Future Man would really buy into this. Right. Everything is just, and it comes back, you're leading your life. And so, that even though things are a little bleak right now, they're not going to be bleak later if you just kind of ride that wave. So, Sue, do you want to talk about kind of those three aspects, so musically related, vibration, polarity, and rhythm a little bit, your perspectives on those?
Okay, so with vibration, one of the things I talk about in the book is that we're very accustomed to thinking of vibration in terms of tones and sound, but also rests have vibration too. And I talk about this musician named Evelyn Glennie, who's an amazing percussionist, and she doesn't only play the non-tonal percussion; she plays marimba and all of that, and she's deaf, and she's won Grammy Awards and worked with a lot of high-profile musicians. And she talks about in some videos, she talks about how she learned to be a musician because she wanted to be a musician, but of course, when she was a kid, they said, well, you're deaf, so you can't be a musician, so that's out. But she had a music teacher who was sympathetic to her situation, and he taught her to put her hand and feel the vibrations of different timbres and different frequencies, different tones, and different instruments, so that and she just kept doing that, and eventually she was able to distinguish tonal differences, so frequency differences, not just a feeling of vibrating, right? She could actually discern the difference between notes, and that's how she plays. She plays barefoot so that she can feel the vibration. And I in music school, also on the campus was an art school, and we had a friend who was in the art school, and he was deaf, but he played the drums. And I was always fascinated by that. Like, how does this guy follow us? Like, how does he keep with us, you know? And it wasn't until many years later that I understood vibration is something that's felt. It's not something that's heard. You feel vibration, right? So, to not make this too long, that's, you know, and then going into polarity, silence has a sound, right? We think of the polarity of sound and silence as being opposite, but the principle of polarity shows us that everything is connected on this spectrum that connects the two poles. And Evelyn Glennie says, silence is the heaviest sound that you're ever likely to experience. And when you're sitting on top of a mountain, you know, Jeff, I don't know if you can go up on top of those Himalayan peaks there, but when you're on top of a mountain and you're sitting there and you feel what silence is, you know, it's not just something that's heard, it's something that's felt, right? And then rhythm, everything has, all movement partakes of rhythm, is how the Kabbalion puts it. And everything that we do in music uses rhythm in some way. And in our life, we see that we have rhythmic patterns that repeat, if you look at it that way. Because as we're going through our day, you know, we have changing of moods. We have how the body feels at any particular moment. We have phases of hunger or phases of desire, you know, negative or positive states of mind, right? And if you observe it, you see they all fit into a rhythm. And we use these same rhythms in music. And in fact, music takes rhythms from nature all around. Like the bossa nova drum beat is a famous example. You know, boom, 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 boom. That's the bass drum in bossa nova from the heartbeat. That's where it comes from, right? So, or when we're programming a set or a concert, we have to think about the different rhythms, because people are really connecting to rhythm on a primal level. And that's why we have to think about this principle as it pertains not only to our life, but also to our music.
Vibration, polarity, and rhythm, Cornelius? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I also wanted to back up what Sue was saying about pray unceasingly. That is a good, that's kind of a better way to unpack that, because it's gotten to where, my position, and last year I went to a handful of colleges and I rolled this out at a couple of the classes. I don't know how it was received, but which is basically that there's no such thing as secular music. You can write secular content of lyrics, or seemingly, but the entire activity is reverent. I've been using the word reverent, but people don't understand what I mean by that. They think it's a mode of speech, like speaking irreverently. I'm talking about a state of mind, a state of like a disposition, which is kind of what Sue was really explaining. So I'm very much in agreement with that, and that gets us out of relying too much on some of these mechanics or the analysis of it. Vibration is great to think about because it's basically like energy, and it kind of we understand that there's a spectrum, right? So we understand that dogs can hear vibrations that we're not cognitive, that our aural gear is not perceiving. smells are also vibration related, although that's a controversial theory. But I recommend the book Emperor of Scent, wherein the reason this guy's theory was not accepted was because he had to combine physics, chemistry, and biology, and none of those fields really liked that idea. They're just split into two camps from the 1800s about how smell works. I don't know if it's the same now. The book's like 20 or 30 years old, but so energy, like chi, so moving from the physical into the vibrational and then beyond into sort of more subtler realms until we get up to the archetypal realm and then maybe unity consciousness. So this idea of understanding there's a spectrum of things going on all the time. Polarities are tricky. I often try to dispel polarities. I don't think there's categories of the known and the unknown. I think there's the known, the unknown, and the unknowable. And that's just one triumvirate. It's not really a clean polarity. For instance, the opposite of hot water would be what? You're going to say cold water, but what if it's no water? What if it's like lukewarm water? That could be, you could make a case that's the opposite. Is the opposite of a B flat, a B sharp, or silence. So, these things are pretty fluid. They're not as pat as when we're looking at things they are, which is why I think, like what Peter's looked into, what sacred geometry, the same thing Coltrane was up to, right? I mean, looking at ratios and relationships, you understand that they have both a finite relationship, and then there's things that they reach beyond that things can start to get fuzzy if you're too narrow-minded about it. Rhythm, that the way I think of that, that's the horizontal axis. So just being what we started talking, one mind, vertical awareness, absolute presence of the now, that's the vertical axis. So rhythm, it may be primal, it may be integrated, there's a heartbeat, maybe there's a heartbeat to the universe, but in a way, if I had to make a hierarchy, it's not number one. It has to be number two, because now we're in linear time, which is kind of a paradox. You can't experience time. It's just a way to explain change. And so it gets very trippy real fast. And in music, that's part of what we're exploring, because it's like we're providing a kind of ephemeral timeline with rhythm. And I don't know, it's a very powerful thing that goes beyond just, obviously then with dance, there's a more embodied experience of it. What I've noticed amongst musicians, my students and colleagues, is there can be a misunderstanding about the mental version of rhythm. And what I try to point out is you're never going to play the correct rhythm by playing the right durations in the right order. The reality is, solo or in an ensemble, as soon as you play the second note, you have set up where the pulse is, and the pulse is happening, like in the room somehow, whether it's in our consciousness or in our bellies or in vibrational intelligence. So Sue knows, she talks about it a lot in the book, like this the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. Some of it is that we're all locking in to a rhythm that we're in training to, and that's how we're playing together. We're not playing together because we're doing the math physically correctly. You could understand it that way, but that's not really what's happening. If it was what's happening, it wouldn't sound as awesome. If that was the limit of it.
Yeah, cool. Peter?
Yeah, I think that these three belong beautifully together. Vibration is a sort of a temporal change of polarity, if you will. The Earth spinning, the universe spins a lot of stuff, right? And when you spin something on an axis, you get poles. You get magnetic poles. You get the north and south point of the sphere that's spinning. That's just a part of reality. And so I think polarity is actually very real in terms of the way the universe works. But in terms of the way waves undulate, they undulate up and down, and those are sort of two poles. also, and the rhythm is this the temporal aspect of something that repeats, something that happens that we're aware of. Whether it's an emphasis, it's a groove. The rhythm is another thing that's throughout the cosmos, as we've all been talking about in terms of seasons and heartbeats and all those sorts of things. And then musicians really rely on rhythm, as Cornelius was just saying, as this glue that keeps them grooving together and on the same piece of music. We could all be off on different rhythms and sort of create a cacophony, and that would be a fine piece of composition for someone. But in general, I think we tend to vibe with things that kind of get into our heartbeat area, and into that zone, of where our breathing too. Breathing is the life rhythm that we just have to do every second of the day. And so we're used to rhythms, and we have to, move in a rhythm. When we walk in a rhythm. And I just don't know that you can escape rhythm, and musicians don't try to. We try to maximize it. I mean, really, it's because it's also fun. It's a vibe. Rhythm is a vibe. It's a groove. What do we call it? A groove, a vibe. And, we need to have that to make the music compelling as a form of communication.
And this is how we relate to the audience too, right? Because
Totally.
Because people come to our performances, and they're at different levels of musical understanding, and so some people, they don't have a clue what you're doing musically,
Right.
but they can relate to this in a primal body sensation way to the rhythms.
Right. They might not want to have a clue. They might want to just experience it, and that's really kind of what I aspire for in playing music, is to create the experience that isn't. Musicians will be in the audience, and they might think through it a little bit more than just the pure appreciators. But just being there.
So
And by the way, there's three rhythms in the body, but nobody talks about the third one. We have the heartbeat and the breathing. There's another regular physiological function.
The circulation.
That's the heart. I mean, it's part of the circulatory system.
Oh, okay.
So what is it?
The cerebrospinal fluid pumping from
nervous
your
system
to your brain stem. And there is a way to experience it, but it's very subtle, and I've never been sure if I've gotten it right. But yeah, so there's a nervous system regular rhythm too that's going on in the background.
John Cage talks about that. Because when he went into the anechoic chamber, which is a supposedly soundproof room that they used to test appliances and stuff, and he went into the one at I don't know if it was at Harvard or whatever, and he's like, he tells the engineer, I just want to sit in the anechoic chamber and like vibe on it.
Right.
And he sits in there, and he comes out, and he's like complaining. He's like, I need sounds in there, And the engineer said, the low sound was your circulatory system, and the high sound was your nervous system.
It drives people insane, apparently. Another interesting thing about rhythm is if you take a drum beat or a sound and you play it on it and you make it go faster and faster, pretty soon it becomes a sound. It becomes a frequency, So rhythm and that's the correspondence aspect too.
And then it becomes light.
And then it becomes light if you go way up a lot of octaves. And an interesting thing about octaves, which is I'm endlessly fascinated about that, is that we can even taste octaves. Like water is hydrogen and oxygen in a 2-to-1 kind of powers of 2 kind of relationship. Oxygen is 8, hydrogen is 1. That's already kind of a numerical octave, but actually they're atomic weights. But the more interesting thing is it's got that H2O, but when you taste water, it tastes like an octave sounds, which is very satisfying, but not super interesting.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that more. Drink, drink with your ears. So there, I mean, just in this conversation, there's so much in these principles that are, a lot of them are, they seem obvious, but then a lot of them don't. So the next one, the cause and effect, this one to me is really profound in the sense that it says to me there's no coincidences. And one of the first insight I think of the Celestine prophecy was recognizing synchronicities. And so my life, I feel like even in the last 6 months since knowing about this, has been more full, because almost everything that happens, I think, oh, that was meant to be. Oh, I'm meant to meet her. Oh, I'm supposed to do this. And it's rather than just shit happens and then you die and you can just have bad luck all the time. I think it's nice to think, no, that's not really true. Something is happening to make these things the way that they are. So, Sue, how do you think about cause and effect?
Yeah, and what you said before, that it seems obvious, right? It might be the one that the Hermetic principle that seems the most obvious of all. It's like, of course we have cause and effect, but people relate this to like Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? But look at the wording of what that theorem says. For every reaction, there is an equal and opposite reaction. It doesn't say there will be an equal and opposite reaction, right? Because they both happen at the same time. And what Cornelius was alluding to earlier, of how we have to break things down into this linear experience of time, because that's our limitation as humans, right? But if you look at the sages, and then you see that time, they say, no, time is all happening all at once. They even made a movie about this a few years ago, and it was called Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? And so our experience of time has to be this linear thing. But even if we look at it in that way, we can have a cause that doesn't produce the expected effect, and we can have an effect that we don't understand what the cause was. And so it seems like an obvious thing to say cause and effect, but when you start really delving into it, you realize it's not obvious at all. And in the book, I mentioned this story that I heard from Philip Glass, where he was talking about the minimalist concept in music composition. That gets criticized a lot because people say that it's boring because there's too much repetition, right? But Philip said, no, there's no repetition. There is no repetition, because every time, and this is also what Cornelius was alluding to, every time you play a note, if you already played that note, it doesn't matter, because the very fact that you played the note before changes the note the next time you play it. And then the next one is also changed.
Right.
And the physicist David Bohm, who I love to read his work, he says, I'll read this quote. He says, each moment is a projection of the whole, but is then reabsorbed by the whole, which affects the next projection of the whole. And so you can think of it like ocean waves, right? A wave comes and it's an individual wave, then it gets reabsorbed, and then the next wave comes, and that too is an individual wave that gets reabsorbed. And it's not the same wave as the previous one. So that's my idea of cause and effect in a nutshell.
Cool. Cornelius, you have thoughts?
Yeah, well, I wrote a movement called Cause and Effect. I did a piece. It's 20 years old this year, called Agrippa's Three Books, and he wrote 3 books of occult philosophy in the 1500s, and was one of these magician, composer, medicine astrologers that I was referring to from the Renaissance. And I do recommend that text or you could go to my Bandcamp with the album, where there's quotes that relate really directly to both music, vibration, and the whole occult philosophy book of his starts off with that about first cause, this idea, and that's kind of back to the mentalism chapter, where there's one cause and the rest is effect. In Taoism, you have the Tao, you have yin and yang, you have the 5 elements, then the 10,000 things. It's like a process of emanation, and brings in all of that kind of fractal, like Indra's net kind of
butterfly effect.
Yeah, and so also karma obviously is operates with this kind of idea of an axis of action, that it's not. It's very overlapping with correspondences, but I think the difference is that we're focused on kind of action and the concept of time, just like Sue was saying, where time has to come in, but is it really as neat and fixed as we think it is? And so it's also reminds me of that, it's turtles all the way down kind of thing, where that's a lot of our hubris, is thinking like, oh yeah, this caused that, or this effect was caused by this,
or I caused this.
Right. Yeah, and so it's a very it does get pretty fractal, pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's right.
There's like initiating. Like, what's the difference between causing something and initiating something? You could divide up the.
Which relates to that concept of the butterfly effect, which I'd mentioned, where the smallest action precipitates a fractal of, chaotic reactions that then themselves go on and do the same thing. And this one, cause and effect, to me, is sort of troublesome because. I know it's a reality, but at the same time, I know there are philosophers, and I have to give them some credit, who say that in a certain way we don't have free will because of cause and effect, and that that the universe determines that this particle is going to go there, that electron is going to go there, and it's going to hit that one, it's going to go there, and so in the end, our thoughts and things like that are all these consequences of all those things that have to do what they did because of cause and effect. So cause and effect gets into like, now I'm deciding to move my hands in this weird way, but was it me, or did the universe kind of fire those electrons? So it gets into the idea of what is free will when there's true cause and effect at every level of reality.
Gurdjieff has an interesting way of explaining that. He has his idea of the law. He calls it the law of octaves, and what he says is that the more evolved you are spiritually, the fewer of the earthly laws will apply to you. As you approach the cosmos, you'll get affected by more cosmic laws. So
welcome to the club.
Yeah, right. So, and when you think about it, that explains the ability of some of the siddhis, in Indian philosophy, like the ability to fly, because you are more. You've approached that cosmic level, and so the earthly law of gravity doesn't apply to you anymore.
Yeah,
which goes back to mentalism too, because then, in a certain way, you're in this virtual reality of sorts. That now I'm flying in my and that's the reality. Because
we do have the microcosm, macrocosm with what Peter was saying about. Butterfly effect, which reminds me of how an avalanche starts. But I would say that there's a shadow axiom here that's like things are not what they seem. And the example that I think is important, I don't know if I've said this in a public forum, so I want to use this as an excuse to say it, everybody knows this example of, it's like an outlier example. I want to say Malcolm Gladwell used it, and there's like a video of this guy who's like the one guy dancing at this concert, right? And then it's like
I know that guy.
It's like to demonstrate that it just like how slow things can happen. Like then there's one other person dancing, and for a long time it's just the two of them, and then like eventually it does like spread and like everybody's dancing. So this is used in TED Talks, and people always give this, and it does have a good feeling, that interpretation. Well, the behind the scenes, go and find the full video, and this guy, the first guy dancing, is just irritating people for like the 20 minutes before that. He's trying to force people to dance with him, and he's being overly physical with people, trying to make them get up and dance. And eventually he gets the clue to just leave people alone. Still dancing, maybe he's on something, I don't know. And then the first guy who gets up to join him is clearly making fun of him as a way to make, if I remember correctly, this friend who had been bugged by this guy feel better by making fun of this guy. And so that's how it gets started. Like the way it spreads is still true, but the whole interpretation of the innocence, like it's feeling the joy of the moment, and slowly it catches on and spreads. No, that's not actually what happened. And what really happened is more my experience in the external world these days.
That's a polarity flip to me.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah, that's good.
So just to move along, so we can say that we talked about all the principles. The last
And
one,
hopefully I can demonstrate a little bit of waves and polarities and things just real quick.
yeah. So gender, this one to me is a little more different, and yet relates. I mean, there's kind of polarity and whatever, and so masculine sort of represents the left brain, reason, analytical thought, drive, power, will, motivation. Well, I should say the masculine energy, not the brain. The feminine, sort of right brain, though, represents creativity, intuition, imagination, feeling, emotion, empathy, and nurturing. And men have masculine and feminine energies, and women the same. And it really, I don't know. We know we live with male and female and all that's kind of in between, but when you realize the whole universe has these masculine and feminine principles, the clover seed is the masculine, and the earth is the feminine, and how these things relate, I don't know. It's just another one of those that kind of makes you step back and think, wow, things aren't as they seem, as you all said. Sue?
Yeah, and again, we always have superficial aspect, and then we have a more profound aspect of the same principle, right? So what we do, a human tendency is to try to make everything super literal and super kind of superficial. And of course, we all have the masculine and feminine archetypal traits. We have all of them inside ourselves. I'm a woman, but I have some masculine tendencies and masculine traits, and you guys are men, but you have the corresponding feminine, if we're they're just archetypes, right?
Yeah.
But what's happening now socially in society, people are trying to externalize all of this and say, well, I'm this, type of, I don't know, with the whole thing with the pronouns and everything. And trying to make that a very literal thing.
To quantify it, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a spiritual idea. And in music, we have to use both of the principles, because the feminine principle is, it's reception, it's ideas, it's generative, right? But then you can't have only the feminine principle. You need the masculine principle to put it out there, to make it a reality in the world. And so when we talk about the divine feminine, and that's why we're together with our while you guys are together with your ladies, you know. I mean, the first time I met Cornelius, all he could do was talk about Felicia all the time. And I'm like, well, I got to meet your girlfriend, you know, take me over to your place so I
Sounds
can
good.
meet this incredible woman, right?
Yeah.
Because he, you know, this is the divine feminine. And then my husband, you know, to me is the representative of the divine masculine, you know. And so not that everybody is perfect or
Right.
anything like that, but it's this quality that makes you want to be with the opposite of yourself. And then inside the female, Carl Jung talked about this, inside the female, the masculine personality that's below that is the animus, and the feminine aspect that's inside a man is the anima. You know, and these we're influenced by all of these things. So in music, we need everything to create the music and to put the music out there. But then there's also a very superficial aspect where we have to deal with gender equality and all that, and we see that all the time in our business. So that's kind of gender acting out in the world, you know.
Yeah. Cornelius?
Yeah, it is tricky because that, you know, I mean, gender is sort of making a polarity concept that's now biological. So I see what you're saying about literal, but in a way that word itself kind of literalizes polarity, because yin and yang are a more appropriate kind of like more cosmic level, shadow and light, you know, day and night, you know, these are they are literal, actually. Day and night is literal. So we could say
Right.
time is an illusion, and I believe that. I just said it earlier. But at the same time, people are going to have to literally figure out what's going on, and will the sun come back, you know, tomorrow, you know, way back, when they're trying to figure out what's happening, and it forms a rhythm. So
That's a
this
rhythm,
does
yeah.
start tying everything
Right.
together. But and Jung, I think Jung had a pretty good approach to it, and I think a lot of his Maria Louise von Franz also, who she had this incredible interview that was up on YouTube, and then it just got taken down. And so
Wow.
she's one of the best sort of Jung students who wrote a lot and has a lot of things that really explore these feminine archetype in fairy tales, for instance. Her book, she has a whole alchemy book. She has a lot of books that handle a lot of these topics really well. But in terms of playing, and especially on shakuhachi, I tend to use bright and shadowy, not as labels for moods, but the literal description of the timbre, because of how our instrument works. And I do think that understanding a spectrum, or what I would call like a rainbow octatonic, is more appropriate, because how we've devolved from the modes to major and minor, that's a regression, right? We think of major and minor as a kind of like a polarity, and it's like it's a happy or it's sad. And first of all, that's an overlay. I think that you can retrain yourself to hear how I heard one time people might have heard 200 or 300 or 400 years ago, which is minor feels at ease and major feels stretched. I almost never write in major. It just feels sarcastic to me, but that's just me personal.
Well, especially in equal temperament, because the major third is so sharp in equal temperament.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I thought Jacob Collier had a very interesting little video that I saw the other day, where he's looking at the circle of fifths and showing how the major from the C, take it from C and you G, and you get the pentatonic, the major pentatonic on the one direction of the loop, and the other way it goes into F and B flat, and you get these fourths making the minor side of it. But he looked at it in terms of open, major's kind of open, and then the minor's a little more closed. It's not, happy or sad, but and it kind of made sense in terms of the emotions that were evoked a little bit, or the response to it. But you could train yourself to feel happy every time you heard the
minor seventh
whole
chord,
tone.
There's nothing more stable and satisfying than two perfect fifths, a minor third part.
Right.
In many, whereas that major seventh chord, I almost can't stand it. But
Yeah.
that's just me,
Yeah.
personally.
Well,
But,
because the major seventh has two major thirds in it.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my
but
God.
the way out of that dichotomy, it
Gotta
was
have
already
it. You
there.
gotta have it. Sorry. But you
The
can
way
put
out
a
of that,
flat 5 in there if you're really worried about it.
the way out of that was already there with the modes. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't shy away from the major third, but I'm going to use it in Mixolydian because that's a
Yeah.
better
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the fourths. Fourths are beautiful too.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, in some ways, that is when things boil down into a two-part dichotomy that can be a way of narrowing. But the idea
Yeah.
of receptivity versus penetration,
Yeah.
light versus shadow,
Yeah.
these can be
And
profound.
sometimes you can't really avoid some of these things. Just I always go back and I'm sorry, I always digress to this, but like, space, this great void is like the biggest rest ever. And then inside this, you have these stars and galaxies and things that are shining out light into this void. And those principles in music to me are there. And I think they are yin and yang in a lot of ways. Is like without that space, those stars have nowhere to be, and without that rests, notes really have nowhere to be, no, there's no articulation. It's just one note or whatever. But you have to have the, and I guess it is a little in our day and age. It's a little triggering to use feminine and masculine in a certain way because of the biological aspect and everything we've gone through in our culture. And it's really kind of, because I was talking about this to someone, my sister, the other day, and I was going through these principles, and I got to that one, and she sort of, I could see she felt a little uncomfortable with that because it was sort of like starting to label things in a way that related to them as a person. But and like Sue said, you have to go to the more profound level of and I think maybe the wording yin yang is probably a better way to look at it.
That makes sense to me. So I heard Daniel Levitin, who wrote This Is Your Brain on Music and most recently Music as Medicine, or heard there was a secret chord. I heard him say, well, there's actually no music until it gets to your ear, until it gets to you, or maybe you feel it, as your drummer, the deaf drummer, you feel it. And so that's kind of mentalism as well. I mean, we're talking about music and Hermeticism, and he's saying there's not actually music out there until you hear it, like the tree falling in the forest sort of a thing. But I'm very happy that we've gone through these principles. It seems like you could talk just for hours and hours and have, amazing number of rabbit holes. One of the things that doesn't come up for me in Hermeticism, or maybe I'm wrong here, is things like, where does entrainment fall in? Where does intention fall in, or even love? I'm not sure those things are part of it, but it sure does provide an interesting kind of roadmap and framework for how you can look at life. And in some ways, it seems like life is music. It's all
I think
vibrating all the time.
entrainment was the lesson of the story Cornelius told about the dancing guy. Because everyone's, eventually started dancing because he created a vibration and a rhythm that everyone had to entrain to eventually. And it's one of my favorite videos. I suppose people might say it's a boring video, but I love it. It's the one with the 64 metronomes, the old-fashioned kind, right?
Oh,
Not
yeah, I
the
love that.
electronic, right? And they get started all different times, and it's a chaos. And then after a few minutes, they all entrain with each other, one by one. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Through the medium of the platform that they're all mounted on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know, does it address, where does cymatics come in? I mean, I kind of look at that with the sand or the salt on the tone generator plate and making these beautiful diagrams and shapes. And I think, well, we're just spun sound. The Indian concept of nad has the unstruck sound is the anahatanad, and the ahatanad being everything else that's struck. And how does that kind of fit into it? Anyway,
Well, that gets into like sort of the limits of our conscious abilities, because the sound really in the air is so beautifully vibrating, you know, and the kymatics in a certain way show us a little glimpse, a little slice of what that's doing. But really, the beauty of all those vibrations are throughout, you know, and you can see this sometimes if you take some hallucinogens, you will sometimes catch those beautiful fractal patterns and things and stuff, and that is, I think those are all part of the vibration. You know, that's you're seeing vibrations in a different plane, basically, I think.
Yeah. So any sort of thoughts that you have that you haven't expressed that you'd like to mention? Because I would like to see if we got a couple other people here.
Can I just do a quick little show? Can I do a quick little show of the different drummer? Just not to. I'm not trying to advertise. I just want to show the principles. I think it'll just be fun. I think it's for entertainment.
Get that set up. Anybody else have questions or anything?
Yeah, if anyone has a question.
Final thoughts, because we're sorry about the Facebook Live failure, but it set us a little tad behind for people who might be listening. Okay, Peter, you want to show that and explain?
So this is some software that basically it uses waves and it uses vibrations, basically, where they're expressed in cycles per measure. So, you know, it's like 2, 3, whatever cycles per measure. That's the frequency of this. Or if you go lower frequencies, it's measures per cycle. So here's like, this would be something that cycles every 3 measures. It goes through one cycle. You see that wave there. So you have a frequency in terms of measures per cycle and cycles per measure. So I'm just going to do, I'm going to set it to 1 here. 1 cycle per measure. So what you see here are 2 measures, and I'm going to play eighth notes on a marimba, and then what I want to show you is the waves, the frequencies, the vibration is going to apply to notes, rests, has its own wave, ties, dynamics. I'm just going to show dynamics and rests for a second, but right now I'm going to just do an eighth note with no variation. This is sort of pure rhythm without any expression or anything there. So you have now with the note wave, I'm on the note wave. Look, if I add in the wave, that's a very simple up and down polarity. I can go to a higher I can force them above that line, or below it in this case. All right, now that's eighth notes. If I switch to 16th notes, or I'll do, so there you have. Now let's go to dynamics and add a little dynamics in there. So the dynamics is also a wave. So let's change the emphasis on the rhythm. And you can add these waves together. And you can change it to another resolution. I can switch it back over to go back over to the note wave and switch it back. Add other frequencies into it. So this is a little bit of the law of correspondence, where it's 2 levels that are added together. And as I was saying before, if I go from that resolution all right, so there's that, and then here's sort of another type of instrument, a rhythm. This is it with it, where it's just applied to pure rhythm. I don't know how loud that is, but
you can hear it.
You can hear it. Okay, so Now go to your rest wave, and you can add rests in there. Go back to your note wave and add changing pitches and rests. Go to the dynamic wave and add a change in. So anyway, it's just I just thought it was interesting to think about all of what we've talked about and show it in this kind of simplified form where vibration is applied to rhythm and can be added together. That one needs some rests. So there the wave is going above and cutting and making a rest. The wave goes above the line and makes a rest. If I go up, go down a little bit, it makes smaller rests. So anyway, that's how that works.
And that's so cool that you put in dynamic vector too, because
Yeah, dynamic wave, yeah.
that's really important in music.
Oh my God, is it ever? You wouldn't believe the variations. What I love about this, it's just using very simple waves, but it creates really African sounding grooves and rhythms when you apply it to congas and things, because it just has that organic, and you can really mess with the organic nature of it, but it has a rhythm to it because it's a wave. It will keep on putting that emphasis on the seventh beat or whatever, you'll feel it. And that's because of those dynamics.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Well, this is pretty amazing conversation and, very synchronicitous. But thank you all. Any other thoughts you might have about anything? I'm sure there's a lot we didn't say, but I'm just so happy.
Can I show my book again?
Yeah,
I really
sure.
want. I really want. This is like an offering, to the music community. Thanks, CV. Because
Yeah.
I wrote it. The dedication is for my students, past and present.
Fantastic.
Because this is everything I'm trying to do now in my, later in this phase of my life, as a senior, whatever.
Elder.
I'm trying to offer. In my way, I'm trying to upgrade. I'm trying to raise the bar for musicianship worldwide, and that's what my books are about, and all my writing projects are about. It's to try to give that as an offering to the music community.
Yeah.
And I would say that the challenge is the same as the opportunity. I mean, I've been thinking about this stuff, since '94, but you don't have that many colleagues that you speak in this language with, and I think that's the biggest kind of issue or disappointment, is that music's 100% invisible, as I point out in the foreword to the book. Nobody's having that conversation. Nobody's taking the time to think about that. And in a lot of rooms where I say that, nobody knows what to do with it. But to me, that tells us a lot. And it tells us that musicians are mystics, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, we're shaman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's dealing with invisible forces, and there are powers. Like another sort of contrarian example was someone I knew was doing a sound healing course, one of the first sound healing certification things at CIIS in San Francisco. The first time they offered that course back in 2005 or 6. And it was a pretty well constructed course. Sylvia is a great. She knows a lot of medicine chants from I think from South America, and she was the one that put it together. And they went to a lot of cool places, but they went to two different and to me opposing tuning fork people. This is in the Bay Area, right? So there's no shortage of shallow New Ageism, but there's hopefully real cosmic stuff going on too, if you can find it.
Yeah, Eileen McCusick with the tuning forks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and a rest in peace to our colleague Mark Deutsch, who was on one of those Sabbaticus Rex albums, and he's the one that he was training a lot of us in the profundities of this stuff in the Bay Area, and invented a whole instrument based on a whole different tuning system. And so anyway, they went to two different tuning forks, and the one place I determined did not know what they were doing, and the other place had a reverence for what they were doing. And the places that I felt like they didn't know what they were doing, they're trying to have it both ways, to where tuning forks, this is a powerful modality, but also we're just kind of winging it. So just get up on the table and we're going to put some tuning forks to see what happens. And people would have emotional releases and they'd start crying, and they wouldn't really have the structure to help them through that, right? So you can't have it both ways. It's not a powerful modality, and you can just kind of freewheel it. Like Sue was saying about taking responsibility. That doesn't mean being constrained and not experimenting, but it does mean treat it with a kind of a reverence and a profundity. That there's these things are going on, whether or not our little minds catch on or not.
Right.
Totally. And the world tries to press us into always dealing with our music in a superficial way.
Right.
Like,
Commoditized, monetized, commoditized, scheduled.
We have to remember what's the real purpose of what we're doing.
Yeah.
We always have to come back to that.
You know that when you're playing, when you're in the moment, that's when you know the purpose for the most part. If you're in the present, I think.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
A great conversation. Thank you, everybody. I mean, we're just trying to put out there conversations and things to, maybe make as Eileen McCusick, the tuning fork lady, as we call her, who was at Victor Wooten's Spirit of Music camp. She does some profound stuff. And her
where Sue has to go. Sue has to go up
I want to go there.
You got to go, babe.
Music camp. You should definitely go. I've been to a bunch of them. But, Victor is putting it out there, and, a lot of folks are trying to do that, and all you all are so brilliant, and it's just been a pleasure to be able to hear what you have to say and to learn, and hopefully it's that butterfly's wings thing. We just keep doing that to put it out there.
Thank you, Jefferson. You're really
see if we can get a little more harmonious in the world. That would help. Going away from the polarity of violence would be good.
Well, you're a catalyst for peace. You're a catalyst, and you should you should be happy with your love, the level of love you bring to stuff. You can feel really good about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it comes across.
Yeah.
Well, and we all know how much our lives have improved by music and the people we've met through music, and so here we are. It's fabulous, and things will come around. We'll see y'all somewhere down the pipe.
Sure will.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you, Sue, Cornelius, Peter, very much. I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you for participating. Anybody who listens, really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure hanging with y'all. Wonderful.
Likewise.